everyone. It is Miss Karen. We've been working on the letter R, and you know I like to find some books that can kind of tie into the letters that we're learning. This one is Walt Disney's Meet the Robinsons. So see the letter R. Okay, and there's that other R, letter R again. So Meet the Robinsons. And this is a Scholastic book, and I'm just going to say it's by Disney. On a cold, rainy night, a lone figure laid a box at the door of the 6th Street Orphanage and ran away. Mildred, the kindly orphanage director, heard a knock and slowly opened the door. Nearly 13 years later, that baby boy had grown into a young inventor named Louis. But Louis couldn't invent the thing he wanted most, a family. One day, Louis demonstrated his latest device to a couple he hoped would adopt him. But the peanut butter and jelly sandwich maker exploded all over everything. Louis was so disappointed, he wished his real mother were there. He decided to find a way to remember her. He set to work creating a device called a memory scanner, which Louis hoped would be able to recall memories from the past. Louis worked many nights on the invention, keeping awake his poor roommate, Mike. Goob, Ugobane. Finally, Louis finished the memory scanner and entered it into the school science fair. On the big day, the school gym was bustling with excitement. Dr. Krunkelhorn, a real scientist from Inventco Labs, was one of the judges. An anxious Louis placed his invention on the table and covered the device with a blanket. Suddenly, a boy named Wilbur Robinson magically appeared. Wilbur said he was from the future. Wilbur asked Louis if he had seen a tall man in a bowler hat who, Wilbur explained, had stolen a time machine. Little did the boys know that the bowler hat guy was hiding nearby. His evil partner, a robotic bowler hat named Doris, quietly uncovered Louis's memory scanner. With a steel claw, Doris loosened the memory scanner bolts and tore off a bracket. She then slipped away unnoticed. Finally, Louis presented the memory scanner to the judges. With a whir, the device sprang to life. Then it started to shake. The fan flew off, smashing the ceiling lights. One thing led to another, and soon the whole gym was in chaos. With tears in his eyes, Louis ran back to the orphanage and climbed up to the roof, where he ripped out the pages of his invention book. Then Wilbur appeared again. "Cuckoo!" he said, pretending to be a pigeon. Wilbur insisted that Louis fix his memory scanner. To prove he was from the future, Wilbur pushed an unsuspecting Louis into his time machine. "To the future," said Wilbur, as they blasted off. Louis's eyes grew wide as he stared out the window of Wilbur's time machine. The future looked amazing. Wilbur kept talking about fixing the memory scanner, but all Louis wanted to do was use the time machine to go back and see his mother. After tearing up the memory scanner plans, Louis grabbed the controls of the time machine. The boys scuffled and ended up crash landing not far from Wilbur's house. Uh-oh. While Bowler Hat Guy was still in the present, he attempted to pass off the memory scanner as his own invention at Inventco headquarters. But Bowler Hat Guy didn't know how to turn on the device. The Inventco chairman threw him out. Bowler Hat Guy looked at Doris and said, "We must find that boy." Back in the future, Wilbur and Louis pushed the damaged time machine into the Robinsons' garage. Louis agreed to try to fix the time machine if Wilbur would take him to the past to see his mother. Wilbur put on a silly fruit hat on Louis's head to disguise his hair and ordered him not to leave the garage. Louis didn't listen. He wandered over to a travel tube and got too close. Whoosh. Louis found himself rocketing through a maze of tubes that transported him all over the Robinsons' house. At last, Louis ended up outside and met Bud, Wilbur's grandpa. Together, Louis and Grandpa took the tubes to every room in the house, including Uncle Gaston, the human cannibal, Uncle Art, the intergalactic pizza delivery guy, Cousin Tallulah, who wore a skyscraper headpiece, Uncle Fritz and his wife, Petunia, a hand puppet, and Cousin Laszlo, whose propeller helmet helps him fly. Wilbur was furious when he found Louis. "I told you to stay in the garage." "I did," said Louis, "but I went up the tube, and I ran into your family, and—" Wilbur panicked. Luckily, no one had realized Louis was from the past. Back at the orphanage, Bowler Hat Guy was looking for Louis, but he only found Goob, Louis's roommate. Goob had been beaten up by his teammates after missing the game-winning catch and losing the championship. Bowler Hat Guy encouraged Goob to keep his bitter feelings inside. In the future, Wilbur told Louis about his inventor, father, Cornelius Robinson. The world knew Cornelius as the founder of the future. Wilbur explained that when his father failed, like when he invented Doris, originally intended as a helpful hat, he learned from his mistakes. Cornelius's motto was "Keep moving forward." That story inspired Louis. The boy tried to fix the broken time machine, but he failed. Just then, Franny, Wilbur's mother, called the boys to dinner. The Robinsons were having spaghetti and meatballs. Uncle Gaston was even shooting meatballs from one of the cannons he invented. At the same time, Bowler Hat Guy and Doris had just arrived in the stolen time machine. Bowler Hat Guy had gone back in time to steal a dinosaur to help kidnap Louis, controlled by a little Doris on his head. The T-Rex crashed through the Robinsons' dining room and chased Louis. The entire family sprang into action. Wilbur launched a meatball using Uncle Gaston's cannon. It ricocheted off a wall and knocked little Doris off the dino's head. Bowler Hat Guy lost control of the beast. The T-Rex stopped chasing Louis, and he was safe. The Robinsons and their robot Carl gathered around Louis. Everyone agreed that he was a wonderful boy who deserved to have a family that loved him. "Louis, do you want to be a Robinson?" Franny asked. Louis couldn't believe what he was hearing. But Wilbur knew better. He knocked the hat off Louis's head, and the Robinsons gasped when they saw Louis's hair and realized that he was from the past. Franny told Louis he would have to return to his own time. Worst of all, Wilbur said he never intended on taking him back in time to find his mom. Feeling betrayed, Louis ran away. But the ever-resourceful Bowler Hat Guy found Louis and promised to take the boy to see his mother. In return, Louis agreed to show Bowler Hat Guy how to turn on the memory scanner. In the dark room, Louis turned on the memory scanner. Bowler Hat Guy then tied Louis up and switched on a light to reveal that they were in the old orphanage. The light illuminated another surprise. Bowler Hat Guy was someone Louis knew very well. "Yes, it is I, Mike Yagaboyan," said the whirly villain. "If you hadn't kept me up all night working on your stupid project, then I wouldn't have messed the catch. Eventually, they closed down the orphanage and everyone left except me." Bowler Hat Guy had stolen the time machine in the future to get his revenge on Lewis and ruin the course of his life. Lewis suddenly realized something even more shocking. He would grow up to be the inventor, Cornelius Robinson, Wilbur's father. Bowler Hat Guy took Lewis and the memory scanner to the roof where Bowler Hat Guy had parked the stolen time machine. Luckily, help was on the way. To Lewis's surprise, Wilbur and Carl rescued him from the villain. Bowler Hat Guy, who still had the memory machine, blasted off in the time machine, landing in the present. At Inventco, Bowler Hat Guy convinced the chairman to purchase the memory scanner. If that happened, he would change the future. Lewis's future as a famous inventor would never come to pass. As Wilbur pleaded with Lewis to fix the time machine, the boys heard a strange, rushing noise. Suddenly, Wilbur was pulled into the darkening sky. "Wilbur!" shouted Lewis. But in the future that Bowler Hat Guy had created, Wilbur didn't exist. Lewis knew he had to work quickly to restore things the way they had been. Working hard, he made a final adjustment to Wilbur's broken time machine and successfully started the vehicle. Lewis punched a date into the time machine's dashboard control. The time machine transported Lewis back to Inventco's headquarters. "Goob, stop!" Lewis commanded. "She's using you, Goob, and once she gets what she wants, she'll get rid of you." When he saw Doris, Lewis made a promise never to invent her, and with that, she instantly disappeared. Lewis and Bowler Hat Guy zoomed away from Inventco and returned to the future to find it completely restored. The sun grew brighter as they landed at the Robinsons' house, and Wilbur had returned. When Wilbur saw Bowler Hat Guy, he ran to tackle him. "He's the bad guy," yelled Wilbur. "No, he's not," said Lewis. "He's my roommate." As the two boys talked, Bowler Hat Guy quietly slipped away. He had decided it was time for him to find his own way in the future. Just then, Cornelius Robinson arrived home and met Lewis. "Wowee," said Lewis. "So if I go back now, then this will be my future?" "Well, that depends on you," said Cornelius. "You've got to make the right choices and keep moving forward." Lewis waved goodbye to the Robinsons. Wilbur kept his promise to take Lewis back in time to see his mother. This was the chance Lewis had been waiting for all his life. But he knew he had to move forward and live the life that was waiting for him. So Lewis got back into the time machine. Wilbur brought Lewis back to the present, but before returning to the science fair, Lewis raced to the baseball field. "Goob, wake up!" he yelled across the fence, and with that, sleepy little Goob yawned, stretched out his glove, and made the game-winning catch. The crowd cheered, and Goob was a hero. Lewis returned to the science fair and asked for a second chance to demonstrate his invention. Mr. Crunklehorn volunteered to test the memory scanner. "Just give me a date to input," Lewis said, and he whispered in his ear. The memory scanner's screen began to flow, and then it showed the image of Dr. Crunklehorn's wedding. The invention worked! Dr. Crunklehorn was impressed in fact, she and her husband, Bud Robinson, soon adopted Lewis, and he changed Lewis's name to Cornelius. Lewis finally had a family, and his future looked very, very bright. Okay, so meet the Robinsons.